This video will show a takeoff and landing in raining hard IFR conditions all the way down to minimums in a Daher TBM 930. I start with a dark cockpit and I go through the full startup procedures and the IFR setup procedures, followed by the complete shutdown sequence at the destination. You can see I'm running this on a ultra-wide monitor, 5120 by 1440 resolution. It's a Samsung gaming monitor. Here we are at the Microsoft Flight Simulator launch screen. I choose world map, and my departure airport today is Wilmington, Newcastle, Delaware. And I'm choosing ramp 62 as my parking, so I don't have to taxi very far from 27. You need to choose a ramp parking location in order to get a dark cockpit to start up from scratch. Our arrival airport today is Chester County, Geo Carlson in Coatesville. I'm a real-life pilot. That is my home airport. I'm choosing a fuel box parking spot because it's very easy to find on the field. Lastly, I'm choosing rainy weather so that we have bad weather to fly this IFR flight. So let's head to Wilmington and get into the cockpit. Okay, here we are in the TBM 930 in a dark cockpit. The first thing I want to do is change the weather. I go to the ground level and make sure the altitude minimums are lower, and I'm increasing the coverage to make sure there's a lot more rain clouds out there. Okay, we'll turn on the battery master here to light up the cockpit, and I'm going to go through some avionics setup here that can be done before we start the engine or get our IFR clearance. First thing I'm going to do is preset a couple things on the autopilot for later after I take off. Next thing I'm going to do is focus on setting up the primary flight display. Right now the nav source is a VOR, and I want to change that to a GPS. You can see by the magenta lines on the HSI. Next I'm going to set my approach speed bug for later when I'm on the ILS.
TOS system test.
And here is the MFD setup. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a procedure to my flight plan. I'm going to add the ILS 29 approach into Chester County, and I'm going to load that, not activate it. And then I just want to check to see that it's indeed loaded, so I'm going to zoom out on the MFD, and you can see, I can see CERTS and EFICO, which is the final approach fix into Chester County. It is on my flight plan, you can see here, so everything looks good. And then the last thing I'm going to do is zoom all the way in and see where I am on the field and where I am in relation to the runway. I can see that I'm facing the wrong direction, so I'm going to need to turn around. Now I'm going to set up some frequencies, and in order to do that, I'm going to open up the ATC page, and you can see the ground, the ATIS, and the clearance frequencies. So I'd like to set up the ATIS on my COM2 and just listen here, get the weather. And while I'm listening to the weather, I'll go ahead and load the ground frequency into COM1.
Visibility, tree in heavy rain. Sky condition, ceiling 1,000 feet broken. Temperature.
Here I'm comparing the temperature to the temperature the aircraft is saying. That matches. Altimeter 29902 is set.
Runway 27 in use.
And runway 27, yep, that's where I'm taking off.
All aircraft read back hold short instructions. Advise controller, on initial contact, you have EDO.
Alright, now that we have weather, I'll bring ground, make that active in COM1. And we'll tune the clearance frequency, have that set. So at this point, since I know I'm backwards, I'm going to get a pushback here. So I'm going to go to ground services and request a pushback from the tug.
Wilmington ground Daher Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha requesting pushback.
Daher Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha pushback request accepted.
Now this guy is driving the tug. He's not even looking at my airplane. He must be pretty good to just back that thing in without even looking and not smash into me.
Wilmington ground Daher Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha requesting pushback.
I think I might have to complain to this guy's boss. Dude, pay attention. You're going to hit the prop.
Daher Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf
Nope, you're
Sierra
going off to
Alpha,
the
your
right.
request has been transmitted. Transmitted to the
and
operator.
crashing into my leading edge. Great. Good thing this is just a simulator. Oh, he's a magician. He just teleported, and here we go. Okay. And I gotta lead the stop here. See how I told him to
Wilmington
stop,
ground Daher
but I'm
Alpha
still going
Sierra
back,
X-ray
so you
Golf
kind of have
Sierra
to time
Alpha
that
requesting the end of
to
pushback.
get the... There you go. The pushback just
Daher
stopped
Alpha
there.
Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra Alpha request to end pushback received.
All right, now that we're in position, I'm going to go back to clearance. And this was a little confusing. So you can see here I go to my clearance frequency. I'm expecting to get my IFR clearance, but that's not an option. So I go back to ground, and it's an option when I'm on the ground frequency. It's not what I was expecting. So now that I'm on ground here, we can get the IFR clearance.
Wilmington ground Daher Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra Alpha ready to copy IFR clearance to Kilo Mike Quebec Sierra.
Okay, here's the clearance.
Daher Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf
12,000
Sierra
feet.
Alpha is cleared
That
to Kilo
is
Mike Quebec
ridiculous.
Sierra Airport is
They would
filed.
never do that. That's such a short
Takeoff
flight.
runway 275
That's
and maintain
dumb.
12,000 feet.
We'll do it, see what
Departure
happens.
frequency is 118.35
All right, so here I'm going to put the
0312.
squawk code in the transponder and give them my read back. So I'm going to set 12,000
Daher
feet
Alpha
into
Sierra
the
X-ray
altitude
Golf Sierra Alpha
pre-select
cleared to Kilo
of the
Mike Quebec
PFD here.
Sierra
I'm using
Airport is filed.
control page up to do
Takeoff
this.
runway 27
And then the
climb,
vertical
maintain
speed,
12,000
control
feet.
home to
Departure
go
on
up to, I'll do
118
2,000 foot per minute
squawk
climb.
0312.
Daher Golf Sierra Alpha readback is correct. Contact ground on ONE 21.7 when ready
So
to taxi.
here I'm not going to put the departure frequency in. Instead, I'm going to put the tower frequency in because that's the next thing that I'm going to need to tune. I just know that 1260 is Wilmington Tower. Okay, now for the engine startup sequence. Put on the strobe light. And the main generator is on. The AUX boost pump on. And the engine starter initialize. So now I'm going to briefly watch for the blades to start spinning. There they go. Now I'm going to look at NG. When that gets above 13, okay, there we go. I'm going to increase the throttle from a low idle to a high idle. At this point, we need to look back up at the ITT and watch the engine spool up. And to prevent a hot start, you gotta watch once it gets to around 800. We're gonna move from high idle to taxi position on the throttle. Okay, here it comes. There's 800 and into taxi. So that stops it from
Aural warning. Okay.
over temping. Now to complete the startup sequence, put on pitot and stall heat, bleed air for pressurization. Turn on the taxi lights, nav lights. Move ignition to auto. Boost into auto. Fuel tank selection to auto, and turn on the autopilot and trim. You can see that the alerts are all gone other than my parking brake on the MFD. Take a quick look. The autopilot looks good. And we're ready to taxi.
Wilmington ground Daher Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra Alpha with Echo ready to taxi IFR.
Daher Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra Alpha taxi to an hold short of runway 27 via taxiway Echo.
Well,
Contact
taxiway
tower
Echo
on
is completely made up. It's actually
2260 when ready.
taxiway November to Alpha. Quick look to make sure, yep, I have 1260. I'll keep on ground for now since I'm taxiing. Here, the very large MFD is helpful. You can use it. You can see which way you're taxiing on the airport map there. Okay, what the heck? Somebody put a taxi light out here in the middle of the taxiway. That's
Daher Golf
interesting.
Sierra Alpha, did you copy?
Taxi to and hold short runway 27 using taxiway Echo Daher Golf Sierra Alpha.
Alright, I'm switching to the tower frequency so I can get my takeoff clearance, and I'm going to preload Philly departure. That's the next frequency I'll need after I take off.
Wilmington Tower Daher Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha ready for IFR departure runway 27.
Okay, before I take off, I'm going to scroll back out on the MFD, the multi-function display. I don't need to be that close into the airport anymore. And here we go.
Cleared for
Acknowledge
takeoff
clearance.
runway 27 Daher Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha.
I think that's out enough for flight. Here we go. Adding a notch of takeoff flaps. And already at 300 feet, we're in the soup. I'm going to use Control D to turn on my yaw damper and Control Z for the autopilot.
Sierra Alpha contact Philadelphia departure on 118.35.
This is where it's useful to have the frequency preloaded for switching to departure. Here I'm just looking at our torque to make sure I'm not over torquing the engine. And contact Philly.
Philadelphia departure Daher Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha is at 1,500 feet, climbing 12,000 feet.
Which is stupid. You would never climb to 12,000 feet here.
X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha Philadelphia departure continue as planned. Altimeter 29.92. Daher Golf Sierra Alpha, you are 21 miles southeast. Maintain present heading and altitude. Expect vectors ILS runway 29 approach.
So with this new clearance, I put my altitude hold on because he said maintain present heading and altitude.
Maintain present heading and altitude. Expect vectors ILS runway 29
And you'll
approach
see
Daher
that
Golf Sierra
this is a
Alpha.
bug. Like, even though they tell you to do that, he's going to yell at me shortly for not climbing to 12,000. So this is a little messy. That looks like I already blew through my altitude, so I'll do another altitude. Re-engage it. There we go. Honestly, this altitude would make a lot more sense because I have to get back down to 2,400 for the ILS for 2.9. So here I'm just throttling back, trying to bring my airspeed down a little bit. I don't want to get going too fast.
Daher Golf Sierra Alpha, please expedite your climb to 12,000 feet.
Okay, this ATC is an idiot. He told me to maintain present heading and altitude. And that's what I did, so Now he's changing his mind, and we're going to just be climbing to 12,000, listening to what they're telling me to do. This is where the game is completely unrealistic. I'm having some difficulty here hitting the exact 12,000. It keeps overshooting. If I just left it at 14.2 to get my climb established just so I could get going, and then I'll fix it. Right now I'm adjusting the vertical speed up to 2,500 feet per minute, and I'm lowering my altitude. See, my altitude pre-select jumped right below 12, and here we are, 12,000 feet. Okay, outside temperature is 8 degrees Celsius. If it gets a lot colder than that, I'll have to put my de-ice system on. But it's 7 degrees now. Six degrees.
Daher Golf Sierra Alpha descent and maintain 2,400 feet.
Okay, now ATC's just trolling me. I was at 2,800, told me to go to 12,000, now back down to 2,400. So I'm stopping my climb.
Descend and maintain
I put an
2,400
altitude hold
feet,
on,
Daher
which I've
Golf
already
Sierra
blown
Alpha.
through. Now I'm putting in a descent in my vertical speed to get coming back down. And now I'll reset my altitude pre-select down to 2,400, and
Daher
we'll start
Golf
down.
Sierra Alpha, you are 15 miles southeast of Kilo Mike Quebec Sierra. Maintain present heading and altitude.
Okay, here he goes again with this maintain altitude nonsense. It's just a script. He doesn't really mean that. So I'm going to just continue down to the originally cleared 2,400 for the approach. I see temperature hit 5 degrees C, but it ought to come up as I descend. Yep, there we're back up to 6, so no anti-ice needed. Let's take a quick look outside. It's still cloudy. Throttled pretty much all the way back in this descent to keep my speed down. It looks like it's time to tune Chester County, so we'll listen to the weather. The AWAS is 126.25. I'll tune that into COM2. And while I'm listening to the weather, I'll tune the Unicom CTAF frequency for Chester County, 1227 in COM1.
Visibility, tree and heavy rain. Sky condition, ceiling 1,100 feet broken. Temperature, 14C dew point, 1 tree C altimeter, 292.
Okay, 1,100 foot broken is above minimum, so we should be able to make this approach. I'm going to go on to Chester County's frequency. This is not realistic. You would still stay with Philadelphia approach here. You wouldn't go to 1227 until you're established on the ILS. Added the final approach fix, but I'll give the position report right here on 1227. Scanning around. Okay, temperature's back up to 10C, so I don't need the anti-ice. Yep, no ice on the wing. Everything looks good. And we're still in the clouds. Okay, the HSI needle just changed from magenta to green, and it shows the localizer. I can see in the primary flight display NAV1 IMQS 108.5. That means that the ILS has been decoded. Back in the old days, you'd have to listen to the doot, like Morse code, but the modern avionics will tell you that it's decoded. So I just put the autopilot in approach mode, so it'll capture the glide slope. I'm just confirming in the NAV 108.5 is tuned, so we're good. Bring my airspeed back to about 90 knots for a Category A approach. And let's see here, we'll add a notch of flaps to help us slow down. And absolutely nothing in sight outside the windshield. So I'm at 90, starting to go down a little bit, so I'm going to bring my torque up. It's a little tough for me to do this with finesse. I'm using a Logitech Extreme 3D Pro joystick that has a small slider for the throttles. So just finagle it a little bit.
Kilo Mike Quebec Sierra
There's another
traffic
radio
Gunner
call,
Alpha
let people
Sierra
know I'm
X-ray
inbound
Golf
on the
Sierra
ILS.
Alpha is on final runway 29er to land.
Okay, over on the secondary PFD, I'm going to bring up the flight timers. So when I hit the final approach point, I can start a timer. 3 minutes and 28 seconds is what it takes to get to the missed approach point at 90 knots, according to the IFR approach plate. Okay, I'm starting to creep up on my speed, so I'm going to bring my torque back just a little bit. And I can add the minimums here to the primary flight display. 919 MSL is the minimum altitude on this approach. And nothing in sight out there. Okay. A lot of rain. Airspeed is looking good. And coming up on EFICO, which is the final approach fix for the ILS for 2.9. Speed's dipping a little bit. Let me try and bring my torque up just a hair. Glide slope is not captured yet. So the glide slope should be right about center at 2,400 while I'm over EFICO. So that's one way to test to make sure that the glide slope's working properly. If it's centered at 2,400 over the final approach fix, you know it's working properly. Okay, the glide slope is alive. I see it starting to come down as I'm approaching EFICO. Airspeed is good. There's the glide slope coming down. I'm approaching EFICO, 2,400. I'm watching. Give another announce out for traffic.
Traffic Gunner Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra Alpha is on final runway 29er
No
to
runway
land.
yet. All right. 0.7 from EFICO. As the glide slope gets about a half a dot, I'll lower the gear. Right around 91, 92 knots. Airspeed's good. Outside is still pea soup. And put my landing light on. And let's get the gear down. And I crossed EFICO 2,400 and the glide slope was centered, so looking good. I started the timer. So 3 minutes 28 seconds should be the missed approach. I'm a little fast. That'll come up quicker. I gotta get my speed down. The altitude is yelling at me because I'm leaving 2,400. I'll just bring this down to maybe I'll go down to the airport. Airport elevation 660. I'll just bring it down here so it stops chiming at me. Normally here you would set that to the missed approach, but I'm not going missed. When you set the weather, I think 1,100 will be good. I'm still trying to bring my speed into 90. Let them know that I'm coming down, I'm close, and I'm final. 53 minutes. And no field in sight yet. Okay, airspeed's somewhat decent. So I'll get to the missed approach point quicker than 3 minutes and 28 seconds because I haven't been quite at 90. But the barrow minimums of 919 feet, we'll keep an eye out for that. We're at 16,000 descending. Everything's looking pretty good. I talked about this IMQS 108.5 showing that the ILS is decoded. Airspeed's good. I'm just going to bring the engine up just a little bit because it was dipping. And we're coming down, riding this thing down like a rail. No airport in sight yet. Okay. Airspeed's dipping up a little bit again. Time is about 2 minutes. So try and lower the torque. It's just tough to get precision with this little tiny slider. Glide slope looks good. And no runway yet. Airspeed's good. Getting close to minimum altitude. 1,130. Bring my torque up slightly again. There's 1,000. Coming up on minimums. My time is 2:47, but I came down a little quicker. Usually this thing should say minimums when you get there, but I still don't see the runway. In the simulator, it's not going to give me a minimum alert, but I'm at minimums. I'm actually below. I need to go missed approach here. I'm going... Oh, wait, no, there's the runway. Okay, I got the runway made. Right as I was about to go missed. Technically, I shouldn't have been below 919, but it was happening a little bit quick. Now this is unrealistic. I still have the autopilot on and I didn't even flare the plane. It just came down and landed. In real life you would have had the autopilot off at this point. But hey, I can't complain. Pretty much on the, almost on the center line. It's a pretty good landing. So, as I said in the beginning, in order for the flight to end, you got to taxi to the taxi position that you specified in the very beginning when we set up this flight. And I chose right in front of the little fuel farm here because it's something that very easy you can see, so I can get accurately parked where I need to be. And when you pull up in front of the little fuel farm, your fuel interface should pop up automatically, so you know you're in the right spot. Okay, if there's any fans out there, Premier One driver, you see those lines up here we're coming up. That's the runway hold short lines, and you don't call clear till you're past that, or people on the internet will turn you into the FAA.
Kilo Mike Quebec Sierra traffic Daher Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra Alpha is clear of the runway.
I crossed it and I'm clear, and nobody can turn me into the FAA now. So you learn from internet pilot videos. Poor Greg. And there's the little fuel depot here off to the right side, so I'll just slowly taxi up to this thing. And there's the fuel menu, so I know that I'm in the right spot. So I'm going to go through the shutdown procedure here. I don't need ATC anymore. I'll shut down the pitot heats. Get rid of the pressurization auto bleed. I'm going to move the throttle over here to a high idle out of taxi. This is like weird. It doesn't want to come out over here sometimes. I gotta keep trying. There it goes. Okay, we'll just work left to right here. Ah, the menu's in the way. Come on. Adjust this. Shut off the lights. We'll do that last. Pull the aux boost pump off. Fuel selector back to manual. Autopilot trim down. Get rid of these alerts. And we'll pull the throttle back to feather, which will shut down the engine. And if I'm parked in the proper spot and I've gone through the shutdown procedure, when I pull this crash bar down to turn off the battery and the generator, and there we go. The flight is in the logbooks, guys. Thanks for coming along with me, and hope you learned something on this walkthrough.